Welcome back to another episode of Life in the Stands podcast. We got Jake and Zach on the podcast today. We're excited to jump into everything going on in the NBA. There's lots of storylines to talk about. Beginning of the season, lots of cool stuff going on, lots of bad stuff going on. Which teams are going to be good? Which teams are going to be bad? We will find out. Remember to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. We appreciate the support. Go ahead and drop us a comment as well if you'd like us to talk about anything specific in the coming weeks as NBA season ramps up, NFL season gets closer to the playoffs. MLB is now over. But let's jump right into NBA for today, Bender. There's lots of things going on at the beginning of the season. Take it away. What do you want to talk about first?
First things first, I'm actually going to change it up a little bit. I think Bronny James must just be better than Embiid and Paul George at this point. He has more points than them this season, so we kind of got to think about that.
The
No, I'm just
crazy
kidding.
part about that is his first career points is on the LeBron move. The
It is.
the
Yeah.
just it was like, what do you oh man.
Wonder where he got that from. But
Yeah,
no,
he's
I do
seen,
want
seen it too many times in the driveway.
to exactly on him probably,
Yeah.
or over him at this point
Yeah.
because he's tiny. But I actually want to start with the Lakers. The Lakers are an interesting team. JJ Redick, I feel like is having a great showing to start the year. Some of his play calling has been crazy, and I know it's very magnified because it is his first coaching job in a Lakers facility. So like he's going to get the attention from media and everything like that. But it showed like a comparison of like his clipboard in a timeout versus Darvin Ham's, and I started dying. But we don't talk about it. But I do want to advertise that I will end up having TikTok clips for y'all and YouTube shorts for y'all on different play styles and play calling eventually. But no, the Lakers look good. One thing I saw was like the even distribution of shots in the one of the Phoenix Suns games that they had, and that to me tells me that there's more of a system there than there has been before. I feel like it was a lot of ISO ball and kind of like playing through superstars, whereas JJ Redick is giving guys like Rui and Austin Reeves chances, and I think
Right.
that's a good look for them so far.
Yeah, the Lakers have looked dominant, especially Anthony Davis. I mean, he looks like the best player. Like he could be an MVP this year if he stays healthy and continues on this pace. He's really been unlocked. I've been really impressed with JJ Redick too. Like a lot of people had mixed emotions, but if you watched the podcast series with LeBron before he became a coach, you can tell that dude knows ball. And you can also tell he's such a competitor. I was laughing because the first game they did lose to the Suns, there was a bunch of screenshots of him at the press conference, and he's like sweating and he's pissed off, and you can tell he's angry. Like he's angry that they lost that game, and it's like, man, that's a different style than what the Lakers have had over the last couple of seasons. It really feels like they could be a dangerous team just because there is more structure there. It's not ISO ball. There's a system. They've unlocked Anthony Davis. It even seems like there's more accountability now, which I feel like people kind of said like the opposite would happen with JJ Redick being the coach. I feel like the players love him. It's worked out tremendously so far this season for them.
I think there's something to say for previous players becoming coaches as well.
100%.
Um,
100%.
I think relationships are much better, or at least a little bit more like laid back. Now, the other part of that is like, can you control a locker room? Because that's not always the case. But I think
Right.
JJ Redick's done a good job of gaining trust in his players, and they're off to a pretty hot start. And I want to go to another hot start team because they're usually never healthy to start a year. The Cleveland Cavaliers are 5-0 to start the year.
Mm.
Um, I'm a believer in Evan Mobley. I think he's going to be a star at some point. I just don't think he's showing it because he doesn't have to. Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell are going bonkers to start the year. So he's essentially their third star, right? So like you don't have to put up numbers,
Yeah, if
really.
Evan Mobley's such a star, why doesn't he have numbers like a star?
But hey, as long as he's not putting up 0 points like Tobias Harris did in the playoffs, he'll be okay.
uh, I always laugh at the Tobias Harris stuff. He came in, by the way, with the Detroit Pistons and gobsmacked an underhanded Sixers team. Tyrese Maxey is just throwing up shots.
Yeah.
He's just chucking up shots. But I mean, I always laughed because they were like, "Oh, like Tobias is a great part of the team. Like he's a great role player." Like this, it's like he's on a max deal. What do you mean
Yes.
role player? If you're putting up 6 points on average in a playoff series as a max player, that's an issue. Regardless, let's go back to the Cavs. They have looked really good. I think that combination of Garland and Mitchell, it felt like something was going to happen in the offseason with that. Like it felt like one of them was gone, and now they're here and they're 5-0. If they make it to the trade deadline and they're a top four seed in the East, I think they keep the team. It's very
See, I
different what people were talking about last year.
I think they're going to be a top four team too. If you think about it, the Bucks are struggling. Like the
Yep.
Sixers don't even have their players yet. So they're
Yep.
going to be fighting to even be in like that out of the play-in scenario again.
Yep.
The Pacers started out slow. Like
What?
there's all these random teams that are just, I don't
Yeah.
know, like the teams that are playoff teams are not here yet.
Yep.
And the Cavs are just head start way ahead.
Yeah. I mean, the
Um,
Celtics look good because they're going to be the Celtics. We'll talk about that later. The Knicks, I feel like, have gotten off to a slower start with all of the pieces they brought in. Like I thought they were going to be kind of off to a hot start. They haven't done a ton. Yeah, I mean, it feels a little funky in the East right now.
yeah, and I actually want to go to the Knicks now that you mentioned them a little bit. I feel like Karl Anthony Towns has had to be the number one guy for them to win games so far, and I don't think that's what they imagined. They imagined a team around Jalen Brunson,
Yep.
not Towns. So now I don't know what their identity really is. Michael Bridges' shot looks gross. 1 for 5 the other night from three. I don't
Bender,
know why he's.
there's kids watching, Bender. Don't talk about that man's shot. Don't do that.
I don't even know what you call that shot.
You don't.
That's
It's a shot
it's
put is what it
it's
is.
such a hitch. That's like the worst shot I've seen since Michael Kidd Gilchrist shooting like this.
You know what it reminds me of? If y'all play 2K, if anyone plays 2K, and you put on the Bill Cartwright free throw.
It does,
That's
yes.
what it reminds me of because he gets up to here and then it's a hitch down and then
Yes.
I don't know. Hopefully he figures it out. I mean, whatever it is. Another interesting team you brought up though is the Bucks.
Yeah.
And their big man there, Giannis, the first time in his career ever. Because you ask Giannis anytime in Milwaukee, I love Milwaukee. I'm staying here. I want to play my career here. I'm one of those kind of superstars. Now all of a sudden it's, hey, the Nets might be looking pretty good over there. And hey,
Mhm.
maybe it'd be fun to play for the Heat in Miami. And it's like, where did this come from? From Giannis? Like Giannis potentially out. They brought in Dame last year. It's only his second year there. Doc Rivers, whatever's going on there, they were like 30-10 with Adrian Griffin. They fired the guy, and now they're like have a losing record overall with Doc.
Yeah.
What's going on in Milwaukee?
I don't know. And I thought they had a chance, like the way they looked against the Sixers in their first game of the year. I thought the way Dame looked, even in the first two games, the way Dame looked, I was like, this team might have a shot. I don't think their bench depth is very
Yeah,
good. Like they really depend on Bobby Portis. And if Bobby Portis doesn't have a good night, that team does not win because Giannis
yeah,
and Dame can have their numbers.
yeah.
But if like Brooke Lopez and Bobby Portis, that combination doesn't
It
work out
doesn't
that
do
night
anything. Yeah,
from
yeah,
three especially, it's
yeah.
just over.
Well, and I think even defensively, like that first game of the season, like yeah, Brooke Lopez might have looked really dominant on the perimeter, but it's like how much was he challenged on the like Andre Drummond really wasn't that
Yeah.
aggressive in that first game. So like there wasn't a whole lot of challenge for Brooke Lopez. So yeah, I mean, the Sixers, I feel like you can't make any judgments about anything that they're doing right now because you don't know what is going on with two of their three best players. So that's just like a wait and see thing. But the fact that Giannis is even like considered going somewhere else just seems like such a switch up. Like that seems like now, like, is that a trade deadline thing that happens? Like, are the Bucks sellers at the trade deadline?
I alluded to it. I don't know if it'll happen this year, but if Giannis hits free agency, he might be a Nick. He might
Oh,
be a Nick.
oh,
Yeah. I mean, the way
oh.
Bridges looks, the way OG looks, it might be worth trading those guys to try and get Giannis in there. I don't know what kind of draft capital they have anymore after what they just did, but
A,
they might
a,
be able to figure it out.
a cat and Giannis pick and roll.
Or just Jalen Brunson in one of those two.
Goodness gracious. Well, I thought it
Yeah.
was interesting. I mean, you talked about, there will be some upcoming series where you're going to break down some coaches' calls and kind of the different schemes that teams are running. Because it obviously, I mean, if you have a Giannis, that's different than what you do for a cat, right?
Mhm.
But I think what's interesting about those comparisons is if you look at the beginning of the season so far, who's the pick and roll partner for Dame?
It's
Not
been Brooke.
Giannis. It's
It's
been
been
Brooke,
Brooke.
right? And that's far more
Brooke sets
cat.
But Brooke is the main screen setter when you know Dame is trying to get a shot off. If it's
Right.
Dame and Giannis, you see Dame crawl into like a shell.
Yeah. That's an interesting storyline in and of itself, right there. Wonder how that power dynamic is even like, do they even still have it figured out?
It
Must
feels
not.
to me like they don't, and
Yeah,
especially
must
with
not.
the way they're not winning games,
All
especially.
right. Before we jump over to the Western Conference, though, let's bring in another Eastern Conference team that I think deserves a lot of attention this year, specifically Paulo Banchero. this Magic team is pretty deep, and they have wings, they have athleticism, they're young. They're like, to me, they kind of feel like the Eastern Conference version of the Thunder right now. And you also brought in KCP this offseason, who brings you again shooting, perimeter defense, and that championship medal, where you can actually show these young guys this is how you have to act, this is how it's done. So I'm not saying that they're going to be, a top seed in the East this year. I'm not saying they're going to be uber competitive. I'm saying they're like a couple years behind the Thunder. Like Thunder 3 years ago, that feels to me, like a really good comparison for where they're at. Maybe even 2 years ago when they were just starting to be like really competitive. I mean, Paolo Banchero is legit. He can be a guy on a team that goes pretty deep. I think. I think he can evolve into that.
If the Magic end up being a top three seed in the East, I think Paolo is probably top three in MVP voting. That's kind of
Yep.
how I
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I will say I won't get too excited. I said Paolo was great before he even started his NBA career. I thought he was going to fit the way he is.
Yep. You're on
Um,
him.
but I knew he needed to develop his 3-point game. That's fine. You have the pieces around him now where it doesn't even matter. But I do not want to overreact because the Pacers defense is absolutely garbage and he put up 50 against them. I think that's really when people's mindsets changed about Paolo, and I don't know why. I know why. It's the beginning of the season. But you're gonna have the early takes, but I think Paolo will stay consistent. I think he'll be averaging close to 28 to 30 points a game. And the Magic better win. They spent so much money on everybody this year.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to give Paolo a bag at some point.
Yep.
Franz and Jalen Suggs plus KCP and all those guys, like they need to get it done.
So are you saying that the Pacers did not D up their area? There was no D'ing up
No,
of
they did
their
not D up their
areas when,
area.
when they played the
They
Pacers.
didn't have a wall to D up. They had a court
Yeah.
to D up, and they didn't get it done.
They didn't get it done. They didn't get the memo. There's no D'ing up their area, but it's so funny. For those that know the World Series comments that were made from those fans. But speaking of developing a three-point game too, if we do jump over to the Western Conference, I saw a stat. It's like 55% of all shots Anthony Edwards has taken so far this year are three-pointers.
Really?
Like, I was not
But
expecting that kind of a play from him, but I don't hate it. Like, it's growing on me.
okay, hold up. We talked about this. When we talked about the trade, we said the Julius Randle fit with Rudy Gobert was going to force Anthony Edwards to play on the perimeter. So
Spot
there you go.
on.
That proves my theory right away.
Well,
Without I didn't even know that that stat was a thing until you just said
yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
that
So, I
really
mean,
just clicked in my brain.
yeah, Anthony Edwards has taken a ton of three-pointers this season. And, Julius Randle, like he's had some great games and some bad games. He's had some games where he's shot like 4 or 5 from three. And that's also where I'm just like, I don't know if Julius Randle's your high volume. Like he's not going to do that on a night in, night out basis. I'm still kind of with you that I think Gobert might be on the move before the trade deadline just to pull in because like you can play Nas Reed and they probably can trade Rudy Gobert for a younger rim protector and
Possibly, yeah.
and some shooting, like the combination of that, if you really worked out, like Walker Kessler on the Jazz. Like, are you telling me like maybe like Rudy Gobert and a Walker Kessler kind of flip, and then some other ancillary kind of pieces to make that work for both teams? Like, I don't know. Interesting. It could be interesting.
I think Walker Kessler is going to be a Laker by the deadline.
That's been a theme I've seen a lot too. Although, help me understand that. Why do you bring in Walker Kessler if you're the Lakers?
When they won their championship in 2020, I believe, because that was the bubble year, they
Uh-huh.
had rim protectors playing side by side with Anthony Davis because they don't like Anthony Davis playing the five spot as much because he dominates from the four spot.
Yeah.
Will they make this move with the way he's playing at the five spot? I don't know. But I think Walker Kessler brings the same thing that Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee brought that year. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of why people think that, and they don't necessarily have a backup big guy. So
I was just gonna say, like, who? I mean, is it Jackson Hayes? Is that who's there right now?
yeah.
Yeah. So interesting.
It's an
And
interesting little thing, but I think the Timberwolves could trade Gobert and maybe not a younger guy, but more of like a low budget version of Rudy Gobert. I think they could get Capella and maybe an extra shooting piece with it, like a Bogdanovich. I think that'd be fine.
right, right. And you think about, what that brings to their team compared to what Rudy can offer. And you also factor in now you're got a starting lineup probably of like Nasri, Julius Randle,
Mm,
and Conley.
yeah.
and what maybe like Jaden McDaniels, so that you have a little bit more length in that starting lineup if you're going to go small 5 and 4.
Yeah, and then you can always
But
play Nas. You can always play Nas Reed with Clint Capella like you did Rudy Gobert too. So
yep.
like, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
This
you
is
got
all
options.
hypothetical stuff at this point, but you know,
Right, right. Well, we'll keep it in the West, and we'll keep it, talking about centers. Wemby does not look that great so far this year.
yeah, Wemby is Chet's son, to be honest with you.
B,
Um,
B.
I always thought Chet was better than Wemby, to be honest. Now Wemby gets all the attention because he's on the worst of the two teams. So you could always talk about that, but I think that's an under the radar rivalry, and Chet has won almost every time, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Well, you kind of glossed over it, but I think it's a really important point. Chet plays on a way better team. Like he's playing competitive basketball and he's a big part of it. And Wemby may be the guy, but they're not competitive. They're just not. And I did track down some stats for Wemby. Last year in his rookie year, he averaged a little over 22, 11 boards, and almost 4 assists in his rookie year. He shot 46% overall from the field. Okay. This year so far, he's averaging 16 points, 11 boards still, and only 2 assists. And he's down to shooting around 40%. So I mean,
That means
it's really early in the season, but that's a decently significant drop off, especially when he's getting as many touches as he is.
it is, but I won't worry about it just because of the sophomore slump that you always hear about. Because now you have all that film on him, so now you know how to play him or how you want to play him. People didn't really know going into last year. Like, yeah, there's hype around him, but he didn't play very well in summer league or preseason last year. So everybody was like, okay, just chill out. Let's see what happens. They ended up winning a few games last year, but not a whole lot, obviously. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't panic yet.
So
Would
you're
not panic yet.
saying now because there's film on Slender Man, now people can guard him a little bit easier.
At
Makes
least a
sense.
little bit easier. But people always make that adjustment. Like there's going to be film on you, so they're going to make the defensive adjustment. And then
Yeah.
as a professional basketball player, you make that adjustment and be like, okay, I got to kick out of this kind of double team. I can turn baseline, go this way because they double from the middle. Like just like there's random stuff you can look at on film.
Right.
Um, but I do want to stay with the Thunder because they're off to another hot start like they were last year. Um, they
Especially
don't
in
even
their
have
post game interviews, top tier post game interviews.
exactly gotta bark like a dog. But no, they don't even have Isaiah Hartenstein yet. Like, and this team is going crazy. Now I know, like Caruso's a new piece, he's a new piece, and then everybody else is pretty much the same. But that's the part here. Like Caruso is one of the best fits ever for that team and acquisitions ever for a team that was already a top two seed
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah. That
And
kind
then
of
Hartenstein's going to bring in the rebounding with Chet, which they lacked last year. They're filling in gaps.
the Thunder are going to be a dangerous team. They're going to be a really dangerous team. I think that might be a good segue for us to talk about some way too early finals predictions.
Whew.
And, like the Thunder, part of me really wants to pick the Thunder. But then I go and I think about the Timberwolves and the moves they made. We talked about Julius Randle. We didn't mention Dante DiVincenzo,
Yeah.
who I think is he's a huge pickup. Maybe as big as Hartenstein and Caruso combined, in my eyes, for the spacing that he can continue to add to that team. And then you go to the Mavs, who came out of the West last year, and they added Klay Thompson. It feels like Luka is the guy in the Western Conference right now. And until he's unseated, I'm kind of going to take like the Mahomes stance, where it's like, I got to see someone beat Luka in the Western part of this bracket, especially after them adding Clay. So I feel like the Mavs are my Western Conference pick for the finals right now.
Yeah. Throughout that whole time we were talking, we never mentioned the Mavs and we never mentioned the Nuggets, who are off to a slow start. Um,
Confidence in the Nuggets is draining for me.
Me too. I think it's just because I don't think Jamal Murray has it anymore.
And Russell
Um,
Westbrook definitely does not.
yeah, Russ, he's going to get booted out of the league like Melo did a couple years ago. That's kind of how I feel about the situation. Um,
Unfortunate.
I'm gonna go crazy with my Western Conference pick just because it's also another team we didn't mention.
I think I know who you're gonna say.
Another team that looks real fucking good right now is the Phoenix Suns.
Mm,
They added Monte Morris and Tyus
mm.
Jones at the guard spots. Tyus Jones is your traditional point guard and fits that team very well. Monte Morris has always been one of the better backup point guards in the league, and they added Mason Plumlee, which is a very solid center option if
Yeah,
you're talking about like a low budget that they had to be on.
yeah, yeah.
Those are a lot of
Perfect.
good veterans to fit with that team, and they
Ah,
look good.
I like the Suns pick. I thought you were gonna say the Kings after adding DeRozan, honestly.
No,
Um, which I
another
feel
solid team though.
I was gonna say if you really wanted to make an argument, like I'm okay with both of those teams, like making an argument. Um, and we never saw a Suns Mavs matchup last year, right? Because the Wolves knocked out the Suns right away, and they were banged up. They never really were a team last year. They were too top heavy. They definitely did do a way better job of adding depth now. Um, so it'll be interesting out of the Western Conference. It legitimately feels like you can make an argument for 5 or 6 teams.
Yeah,
We haven't even mentioned the Warriors, who look
parity in the
dominant
league
so
is crazy.
far. Yeah, like Buddy Hield is basically the Klay Thompson replacement. Steph is playing the least minutes that he's ever played in his career, and they're winning. Now
Yeah,
Steph's banged up a little bit again, yeah, but at least I mean, like I think it'll be okay. It won't be too long. There's a lot of parity in the West right now.
yeah. The way I look at it, because again, like you said, the team that needs to be, or the player that needs to be like unseated is Luca and the Mavs, who added Klay Thompson. The way you got to beat the Mavs, you need that isolation, like pick on mismatches type of dude on your team. The Suns have three of them. They have
Yep,
Beal, Booker, and KD. So the isolation back and forth game and like clutch play that you need against the Mavs is on that team.
yep.
Um,
Because that's how they
and
want to beat people, right? They have Kyrie and
yeah,
Luka, so they got two guys that'll go at you.
yeah, and it could be guard to guard, it could be forward to forward, it could be guard to center, like any kind of combination in order to
Yep,
pick on a certain matchup that they like. Like KD and Booker could be going at Luca
all day.
all
Yeah,
day,
yeah. And you're not going
for
to
all
get
we
switched
know.
off. Yeah. And
And then
even
for all
Beal
we
for
know,
that matter. Even Beal for that
yeah.
matter.
And
Like
then
you're
for
not
all
going to
we
get
know,
Luka.
like the Nuggets could knock off one of those teams. Like,
Yeah, yeah, because Jokic is still a top 10 player in the NBA, right? And if you have a top 10 guy, some shit can happen. Like some shit can happen. So I'm gonna stick though with the Mavs coming out of the West.
what about
Your
the
pick is the
East?
Suns.
Yeah, what about the
All
East?
right, the East. Ooh,
Who's going to get ballsy with their pick?
I know because again, the easy pick is the Celtics, right? Peyton Pritchard looks ridiculous.
Yeah, I
We talked about
hate.
the Bucks. We talked about the Knicks.
Uh,
The Pacers are still there. We haven't talked about the Heat. If Giannis goes to Miami, what does that mean for Jimmy Butler? The Sixers.
way too early prediction though. Like if that happens, obviously we're going to change up a little bit. But
Yeah, I mean, I I want to be, I want to be a little snazzy, be like, oh yeah, like let's take the Pacers again, or let's take the Knicks. But like, I just feel like you got to take the Celtics still out of the East.
yeah, something in my gut wants me to say Sixers.
Don't do it, Brendan.
Something in my gut tells me Sixers because Embiid's gonna be load managed. Paul George is gonna be load managed. Something tells me that with that being the case, they'll be healthy in the
Yeah,
playoffs.
$100,000 fine. How many games into the season are we for Embiid,
5.
like injury stuff? 5 games. All right, so what? 82 games divided by five. What? It's like 16 fines. So it's like, look, 16 fines of $100,000 to keep Embiid healthy for the postseason. That's
Hey,
chump change. That's
hey,
chump
that was public. That was because he made a public announcement about it. But no, I'm gonna go Suns and Celtics to be safe, even though I want to say Sixers.
Yeah,
Um,
every bone in my body wanted to say Sixers and come up with reasons why for that too. But yeah, it's
on
we have
paper, we're
no,
good.
on paper we're incredible, and the depth is incredible. Like Eric Gordon, Kelly Oubre, Caleb Martin, Yabusele has played really well. I just I don't we don't know what it really will look like yet.
But I now pose a question to you: which team in the whole Western Conference do you think poses the biggest threat against the Celtics? Because we said there's about 5 or 6 teams that, like, because of
Right.
the parity, could make it there.
If the Mavs make it back, I think they win this time around. So if it's Mavs
because of the
Celtics,
extra perimeter shooting, I
extra
imagine.
perimeter shooting, and I think like the Mavs went through a 7 game series, multiple to get there, and the Celtics. We've talked about it. There were some injuries. There were some things that the Celtics couldn't control. That maybe just maybe they had a slightly easier path to the finals last year. Don't want to piss off any No, I do want to piss off Boston fans. Y'all had it easy. The Celtics had an easy path.
Yeah, screw off Celtics fans. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. So like I think those two teams make it back again this year. I think it looks a little bit different if they both have to fight to get there. But in terms of just like pure matchups, who's the toughest test for the Celtics? I feel like you got to pick teams that are strong defensively because they're strong defensively too. So like it's not just about like, oh, can you I'm thinking of the Suns. And it's like, oh yeah, you know what? The Suns, like they have guys that could go at all their perimeter defenders, but who's gonna guard all the Celtics guys if you're the Suns? Like I don't feel very confident about that way around.
But I want to go back to last year because I said this during the T Wolves and Mavs series. The T Wolves are the better matchup for the Celtics
So that's where I
because
was gonna go. Yeah.
they have the defense.
Yep.
Like I think that's the best matchup for them.
I
But
think
I
so too.
don't think they'll make it out of the West, which is like the most annoying part as a Sixers fan because we don't like the Celtics. Like the
Yep.
Celtics, if they can get through the Eastern Conference, will beat almost any Western Conference team, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think you could make a case for the Wolves. I think you could also make a case for the Nuggets, actually.
If they can get their crap together. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah. Like if they're in their truest form, right? Um, but either way, we're 5 games into the season, so a lot will change.
Yeah. And you said about the Celtics having the easiest path. A team that we said was struggling, I said was struggling, that beat the Celtics and is the only Celtics loss this season is the Pacers. And the Pacers have an offense that can keep up with them. And it's very high scoring matchups. Like I believe the game is in like the 120s or
Yeah,
130s.
yep.
They have the same kind of pace and 3 point shooting that the Celtics have on any given night. So I
Yep.
think that's something to look at. They did not have a healthy like Halliburton, Siakam in his first season with the Pacers, a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. NBA season's going to be really exciting this year just because there is so much parity. This will wrap up another episode of Life in the Stands. Want to thank everyone again for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe. Drop us a comment on what you'd like to hear next, and let us know your way too early NBA Finals prediction for this season. And we'll catch you on the next episode.